I've been waiting for these. You might be wondering why I haven't posted a video. Oh, sorry about bouncing the table. Why I haven't posted a video for a while. Well, I had to send these back to the machine shop, and he was backlogged, so I wasn't able to work on this for a while. So thus no videos. TR6 rods back. And here we go. They've been freshly machined. And here we have the ARP bolts. Put a stretch gauge on these bolts rather than using just the torque wrench. And now these are torqued to 55 pounds rather than the 45 pounds that were specified in the manuals. So I had to send them back, as I said, because when you torque these down with these ARP bolts, it distorts the oval, and it has to be line honed in a way that with the right amount of torque on it, or it'll be out of round. When I bought mine, I got it off of eBay. I put in the fastener for the TR6 connecting rods. It's a 206 6005, and you found you could get the cheapest I could find at this particular time was $96. I got mine for about $10 less than that, a little bit more than $10 less. If you buy from the vendors, you'll find you'll pay somewhere around $120 on up for them. So this is where I got mine. Check out the seller, of course. Make sure you're not getting artificials. This is the one. This is the packaging it arrived in, and it didn't. At first, I thought it didn't have any instructions, but it turned out the instructions were hidden behind the bolts. So it comes with this packet of lube, and let me see if I can find where I put the instructions for this. Here they are for this set. Check your part numbers, so on. Use the assembly lubricant. It recommends the stretch method. Stretch the bolts 0.0065 to 0.007. If you don't have a stretch gauge, torque the bolts to 45 foot-pounds using the lubricant. And so a connecting rod should always be resized after new rod bolts are installed, which is what I had done from the machine shop. A log should be kept on everything, and it should, if they've increased by a non-torque length by more than 1/1000th of an inch, they should be replaced. I don't have all that stuff to do that. Here's the machine shop record where they reconditioned the rod bolts with the ARP. They charged me $125, and it was $139 by the time with the shipping. So bolt torque to 55 foot-pounds with the ARP lube. So I could have used ARP, got the stud kit for here for the ARP studs. I could have used ARP bolts for the main bolts. I chose I didn't want to go crazy expensive with this engine. I chose the rod bolts are the only ones I know of that I've heard anybody talk about failing are the rod bolts, and they get the most stress from the pistons traveling up and down. So I elected, if I was going to get any ARP bolts, I would get the rod bolts, especially when I saw them on sale. I could get them for $80. So I decided to do a medium route and go with the most vulnerable bolts, which would be the rod bolts. So I mentioned I went with County pistons, and the reason I did that was this article on Wishbone Classics comparing TR6 cast piston comparison. With here we go, and talking about original equipment manufacturer, ACL, OE, AE, and they compared the different brands that are out there now and found that County well, I'll let you read the article to see why, and you can make your own decision on going with County. I did want to point out that my machinist found that one of the pistons was a little bit smaller than the rest, and so he bored the this cylinder accordingly so that the clearance on this cylinder would be correct, and he specified that this piston, he marked it, this piston goes in number 6. So that's something you want to do. I had everything sent to my machinist as far as the bearings, everything was, the pistons, everything was sent to him directly from TSI where I bought them in order so that he could do that work in the machining. Okay, according to the manual, the big end of the connecting rod, the big end bearing, faces the non-thrust side of the engine facing the camshaft. In other words, this open end, the big end here, faces the camshaft rides right here on this side. So the big end like this will go on here. The big end faces the camshaft. The arrow on the top of the piston is pointing to the front of the engine. Well, with this being where the crank pulley goes, this is the front of the engine. So on this piston, it's hard to see. Here's my arrow. Right here, I've Cerakoted it. You can see that arrow. So this is my arrow, points to the front of the engine. So that's pointing to the front of the engine. So I'm going to line these all up with the arrow. My arrow needs to point to the front. The big end needs to face this way. Okay. My arrow. Here's my arrow. Arrow is now pointing forward toward the front of the engine. When I put it in, the big end is facing this way. The camshaft's here, it's facing the camshaft. So, okay, I'll do the rest of them just like this. I need to make them all look like this one with the big end this way, arrow pointing down. So I'm going to take all of these, and the arrow's pointing down on all the pistons, so I'll just take all these, flip them over like that, and I should be good to go. So clean that out. We'll make sure that the machine shop did clean it. Yep, they did. Looking good. I don't see any swag in there. They weren't. Yep, I cleaned it. It's looking good. Push this way. Pull that up like that. Clean my finger off. Assembly grease. Put it in here. Okay. Arrow is down. That is arrow down. And there we go. And I'll just check and make sure it's the same as this one. Arrow down, big end, big end. Yeah, I have a regular set of circlip pliers or clip pliers, but I just use these. They're faster, easier to get out, work with, and so on. And just tip it in. Set it in like that. Found a socket. Works real well to, oops, that one tipped back. I don't want to force it that far. I get it almost home, and just I can hear it sometimes click going in the rest of the way with the socket. That one is in the groove. That one is in the groove. Rings, I followed the instructions that came with the Hastings rings that I bought. Now I bought Hastings rings instead of the Grant rings on the recommendation of many people, and installed them the way it suggests to install them. I won't go over that. What I did have struggle with is, now when you get over to the manual, it says stagger the piston rings gaps, avoiding a gap on the thrust side of the piston. Well, which side of the piston is the thrust side? Well, if I finally figured it out when I got up here, make sure that the open face of the connecting rod big end bearing is toward the non-thrust side of the air engine. In other words, facing the camshaft. So the thrust side then is facing away from the camshaft, and so on. So now I need to go find my ring compressor, wherever I put it, and we're going to put the stagger the gaps so that they're this way. So my understanding is if you don't stagger the gaps, that it'll blow by, that you can get risk blow by going through there. I've heard other people that take engines apart and the rings have spun every which way. So, you know, maybe it's not as important. I don't know. I'm just going to do it the way the manual says. By the way, I also wanted to point out, you know, when we were looking at the orientation of the rods and making sure they're the right way around, you know, that the big end is facing the right way around. In this manual, which is, I found some by Roger Williams, I found there are some little tips and tricks in it that are interesting. And one of the things he says is as you put the pistons in, he says to spin them around. As he talks about the pistons and so on, he says, hey, if the crank turns over, you have the right rod to piston connection relationship. If the big ends just foul the crankcase, it's the wrong way around. So he suggests two things. One is put the big end shell on first as you put it in. The manual says put it in after. I'm going to put it in first because I've done them before and it's easier to do it that way. But spin the engine, see if you have it the right way around. I've also heard people say to spin the engine with each one, and I've done it this way: spin the engine with each piston, and to make sure that that everything's right. Because if you get a really tight piston for some reason, or really tight bearing in one, it'll become obvious as you try to spin it, and all of a sudden you can't spin the engine. So the other choice I made was I chose to get bimetal bearings. If you look at the King website for King bearings, you'll find that there's this article, Engine Bearing Materials, Innovation and Performance, and there's a PDF. Now I've downloaded it, so let me open it up. And this PDF talks about engine bearing materials, the bimetal versus the trimetal debate. And what he talks about is that the bimetal and trimetal bearings of today are not the same as they were back in the day. And one of the advantages of the bimetal bearings is that they handle dirty, or they handle environments that are not exactly precise much better than the trimetal bearings. So go ahead and read this article. You know, good fatigue strength, good seizure resistance, good embeddability, which is what I was looking at. The lining is thick, so it's capable to absorb both small and large dirt particles circulating with the oil. Good conformity. In contrast to trimetal bearings with thin overlays, bimetal bearings are capable to accommodate greater misalignments. Well, Triumphs are not precision machines, and so this is the reason I went with the bimetal. You may make a different choice. I keep wiping my tools down even though it's clean. This is a brass hammer. There we go. Set that aside. So first step, so these were installed once before, so they're oily. Just do that. Then I will take a Kim wipe at the end. But what I'm going to do now is take my bearing, and I mark them. This is one on the piston side, one on the piston side. So I'm going to clean that really well. Kim wipe. You might notice I've got a high-powered flashlight on my head, so I can see every little bit of dirt and dust. I'm going to clean that off. Really good. Get every speck off of there. Okay. Then toss that one. Clean that off. Get every speck off of there. I can see every little dust and dirt mite on there. It's not so important there, but okay. Toss that one. Some fresh motor oil over here. So take some motor oil, just give it a little light go over. Put that on like this, and although my hands look dirty, they don't have any lint on them. And then I'm going to take this one that I just had, the clean side, just press it in the rest of the way. Okay. And again, I'm going to clean this bearing off. It's still got a thin coating of Gibbs assembly lube on it. So I'm looking for every little possible bit of something there. Now I'm going to go over the piston and wipe it one more time. Take so I've got it basically clean. Take some assembly lube and put it on here. Wipe my finger one more time really well, and then just take it and smear it, and that's that. Okay, now I'm going to come over to the block. Turn the crank until that journal's up. Get a brand new clean Kim wipe and wipe it down. I'm going to do this a couple of times and just look at it, find every little speck of dust and dirt that's on that journal. Okay. On that side. Turn it again. Throw away that Kim wipe. Okay, that's good enough for now. So I'm going to bring this back. And why it isn't as important here is we're going to get it dirty again. So now we're going to flip the engine This is one of the reasons I like side mounting this thing. Fresh Kim wipe. I've already cleaned these multiple times. I'm going to just wipe this down again. One of the things I look for that I'm learning here is that there's gray on those on that surface, and that will okay, I'm looking for every bit of speck and dust. I don't want any gray on there. Taking every speck of dust out of there. And without a really powerful flashlight, you can't see it. And it takes forever in multiple Kim wipes. And that's got it. Okay. That's got it. But the gap here faces toward the open face here. We want the open face of the connecting rod figure is towards the non-thrust side. So the open face is towards the non-thrust side. Open face is toward the non-thrust side. Stagger the rings, the piston ring gaps, avoiding a gap on the thrust side. So we want the piston ring gaps facing the non-thrust side, facing the same direction, coming out the same direction as this. So as we look at it, I want the gaps in the piston facing this open side, facing. Here's the arrow right here, right there. So I've got a gap here, and I've got a gap. Push those up, and a gap here. There's a piston ring compressor. I couldn't find my old one. Somewhere I've got one that I've had for like 50 years. Here I found this one, 2 1/8 inch, because these pistons are almost 3 inches. I think 2 1/8 inch to 5 inch range. PTW80572 seems to work okay. Here I have just a little clean container. I put some motor oil I had hanging around, some Valvoline, doesn't matter what weight, I don't think. So I cleaned this very, very well inside and out. Took a final wipe with a Kim wipe all around the inside. Visually inspected it to make sure it was good and clean. I do the same with a new Kim wipe. Do the same with the piston. I wiped it all down. You might wipe it all down again. Get a new one. I like to use lots of them. And I'm just gonna get this nice and goopy with oil. You notice my piston color is gray here. I've got another video. I put Cerakote piston coat on there. Sprayed it. Those are bubbles, by the way. That's not dirt. Those bubbles you see in the oil. So I'm going to bring it down to about the hole. Tighten it up. You want to put it low on purpose. I'm going to take one more pass on the inside of, or take one more look in here. That's looking good. My open end needs to go this way toward the cam. So there we go. Get the piston in there. Okay, good. Wipe the top of the piston. It'll get oily. I forgot a step. Did you catch that? Fresh Kim wipe. Oil up the cylinder. Okay, there we go. that back in. That's better. Now my piston installation tool looks dirty, but I've cleaned it, wiped it off, every which thing. I'm just taking another Kim wipe and giving it another fresh wipe. I'm making sure now that the arrow is going exactly perpendicular to the top of the engine there. Before I tap it in, I'm going to tap this till it feels nice and solid all the way around. Otherwise, the oil control ring will just slip right out and you'll have a problem. So tap that buddy right in there. And there we go. Now we're going to flip the engine again. And see what you can see. Turning a little bit. Go wipe my hands down again. Just make darn sure everything is just nice and clean still. It looks good. A little dust right there. Don't see any dust there. Dirt. There's a little speck of dust right there. Look at the other side. Speck of dust in there. I get a fresh Kim wipe. Got a whole pile of them on the floor over here. There we go. That got it. Okay. I'm going to put that back up there. Wipe my hand down again. I'm going to take my piston installation tool, one hand, okay, tapping it up. I'm going to guide it, push it back. It fell on me. Let's see if I can get it to come over that way. Knock it back down, crank back. Let's look on that journal, and I got a piece of dust on there. There we go. Repeat the process for the cap here. Clean it like that. clean the edges like this, and I normally wouldn't work over the engine like this. It was all clean before, so I don't imagine there'll be any dirt on there. Okay, I'm going to install the bearing the same way I did the other one, fresh. Okay, as I put that bearing in, you notice I got a little proud like that. This is how I solve that problem. I do not know the official way to do this, but this is how I do it. And if you know another way, can correct me, that would be great. I would like to know. So I take my brass punch, clean it, and I get right on the edge of that tab there. Just push it flush. And that's that. If you know a better way to do that, please let me know. I would like to know. Clean that bearing that cap one more time. Let's put some assembly lube on it. Take a look at that journal surface. There's a little piece of dust on the side. Okay, that looks spotless to me. So we're going to take our cap, make sure it's the right way around. We got the punch marks at the top. That's what it's supposed to be. Wipe the face of my hammer down. There we go. Now my ARP bolts, they have a special lubricant on them. They've come off, gone back on, off, gone back on. There's plenty of lube in there. So we're going to go ahead and put those on. Don't you hate that? That baffles me. Where did I set my ratchet down? Oh, my ratchet is on the engine. The next step is to torque the bearings, the ARP bolts up to 55 pounds, as I explained. I didn't go through that process. I assume you know how to use a torque wrench. If you don't, look it up on YouTube. So we'll go on from there. That concludes this video on the assembly of the engine, at least the rods, the ARP bolt issues, some of the lessons I learned along the way about how to do this with the new things like the different bearing materials or county pistons versus whatever pistons. There's a lot of things I didn't show you because it's been since the 70s since I've built an engine, and I did a lot of silly things like putting the piston ring compressor on upside down the first time, and then looking at it and going, that's not right. So don't feel silly if you don't get it right the first time. But to me, it's about learning. It's about relearning stuff I haven't done for a long time. If you found this valuable, if you found it helpful to you, I hope you might, if you are considering building your own, let me know in the comments or whatever. And if you subscribe, it encourages me. It takes a lot of time to make these videos. And if you subscribe or make a comment or like the video, I don't get anything out of it, but other than just the encouragement that somebody's watching this, and I really appreciate all of you that do. Thank you.